Hello, welcome to dedoc, and welcome to this year's virtual World Diabetes Day. My name is Bastian Haug. I am the founder of dedoc, the global diabetes online community. But as you can see, we're no longer just online, we're also live on stage here, sending from Frankfurt, Germany. We are based in Berlin, but we're getting ready to host Germany's World Diabetes Day just later this evening. What is dedoc? It is a global community of diabetes advocates, and dedoc runs the largest scholarship program in the world for diabetes advocates. Over the last 5 years, we've given out more than 1,000 scholarships to more than 400 alumni. We call them our dedoc voices. And we enable them to travel from wherever they live in Europe, in the US, and Central America, Asia, Africa, India, Pakistan, from some of the poorest countries in the world even, to the major diabetes conferences around the globe. Our motto is nothing about us without us. We give people with diabetes, diabetes advocates, a voice so that they can be present whenever diabetes topics are being discussed. We also run an annual event, this event, on 14th of November. 14th of November is World Diabetes Day. It is the birthday of Sir Frederick Banting, the scientist and doctor who discovered insulin and gave all of us, millions, hundreds of millions of people with diabetes around the world, like me, who gave us life. So honoring Sir Frederick Banting, the youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner in medicine up until today, is World Diabetes Day. It was invented by the International Diabetes Federation, the United Nations, and the World Health Organization. And usually on this day, what we do is we go to different capitals around the world. We bring in our dedoc voices from wherever they are, and we have them share their stories, what they are advocating for, their wishes towards parliamentarians in their countries, in their regions, their stories, their projects, their initiatives. Trust me, if you have a moment, watch back some of our recordings from our earlier doc days, as we used to call them, or these virtual World Diabetes Days from the last couple of years. It is great fun. Amazing stories, amazing people all around the world. However, this year is special, and this year the International Diabetes Federation is celebrating their 75th jubilee, their 75th anniversary. The International Diabetes Federation is the roof of all global diabetes associations in more than 160 countries around the world. They reach hundreds of millions of people through their member associations on the ground, and they celebrate 75 years of existence. And I'm sharing here, I hope you can see that, the 75-year medal with a colibri, the bird of hope, and the blue circle, which stands for the unity of the diabetes community around the world. So this year, instead of hosting our own event, we are joining PDGN, the Parliamentarians for Diabetes Global Network. It is another organization that combines policymakers in the European Parliament and national parliaments and parliaments across the world, even in the United Nations General Assembly that took place a few weeks ago in New York. And they come together to really effect change for people living with diabetes. So PDGN is hosting today and for the next 2 days the first ever global parliamentarians advocacy forum in diabetes. I think I just misread the name of this. It is called the Diabetes Global Network Advocacy Forum. Sorry for that. So we are joining PDGN in celebrating IDF's 75th anniversary. The celebrations take place right now. They kick off right now in Malta at this Global Diabetes Advocacy Forum, which is an amazing event with policymakers from all around the world. And we will invite you to join us in joining them for a first panel discussion on stigma and diabetes at the workplace. We will live stream this important event through our global audience as well to make it reach our followers around the world. But before we do that, we have a short message from the IDF president, Professor Dr. Peter Schwarz.
Welcome to World Diabetes Day 2025, and in the moment, very live from Malta. And I think in a few moments, we will see live each other. I'm Professor Peter Schwarz, and I'm president of the International Diabetes Federation, and I truly honored that we have the chance to discuss internationally here with Walter. A warm thank you to Bastian Haug and dedoc for making this possible. It's a true honor to join you today from our international celebration here in Malta as we mark the 75th anniversary of IDF this year and have World Diabetes Day together with about 200 politicians here in Malta, the politicians coming from all over across the globe. This year's theme of World Diabetes Day is Diabetes and Well-Being, Know More and Do More for Diabetes at Work. A very important topic because we have to fight against stigmatization for people living with diabetes at the workplace. Diabetes affects not only our body from a medical point of view, but it also affects us emotionally and our social well-being, especially at work. Too many people with diabetes still face stigma, discrimination, and misunderstanding. No one should have to hide their condition, his diabetes, or doubt their abilities. Today, we stand united to raise awareness, sharing knowledge, promote better support for people living with diabetes. Thank you to everyone who is joining, whether from Frankfurt, Malta, or online, everywhere in the world, for your dedication and your contribution. I would like to say a very warm, very special thank you very much. Working together with your commitment, we will change the world for people living with diabetes. Let's use this day to inspire new ideas, connect communities, and send a strong message of solidarity worldwide. Great to see you. And I think in a few moments we will meet live again. And maybe we will have a chance to talk in a few seconds personally. I thank you for your commitment, your passion, your energy, and thank you for your actions.
So this was Professor Dr. Peter Schwarz, professor here in Germany at the University of Dresden, the president of the International Diabetes Federation. And I'm very, very happy we recorded this message just 2 days ago, because Peter, although he is currently live in Malta and was supposed to lead the panel discussion, unfortunately cannot join due to health reasons. But we will now switch live to Malta, and we will be joined there by Jackie Ma'louf, the president of the Lebanese Diabetes Association, DIALEB, a very good friend of mine, and she will be replacing and taking on the role of Peter Schwarz, representing the International Diabetes Federation. She will be joined by my colleague, Ana Alvarez-Pagola, who is head of scientific relations here at dedoc, and Sana Ajmal, the president and general secretary of the Parliamentarians in Diabetes Global Network, PDGN. And the last participant, I will have to read out her title, forgive me. The last participant at this panel discussion in Malta right now is the Right Honourable Baroness May of Maidenhead and former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May, who lives with type 1 diabetes herself. These four are now live in Malta, and if all goes well, that may be a bit delayed due to the security clearances there, we will now join them live. PDGN, the Global Diabetes Advocacy Forum, celebrating IDF and their 75 years of existence for diabetes advocacy around the world. If you would like to know more about this event, which will continue for another 2 days until Sunday, please visit our website, dedoc.org. There you will find the link to their main landing page and their full program. It will be worth following. Thank you very much, and here is Malta. This was dedoc.
After one whole quart of brandy, like a daisy, I'm awake, with no bromo seltzer handy. I don't even shake. Men are not a new sensation. I do pretty well, I think. But this half-pint imitation put me on the brink. I'm wild again, beguiled again, a simpering, whimpering child again, bewitched, bothered, and bewildered am I. Couldn't sleep and wouldn't sleep when love came and told me I shouldn't sleep.
But he was to have been, thank you, he was to have been one of the speakers this afternoon and also tomorrow in the Parliament, but unfortunately there's no way that he could speak. His voice is very croaky and he's being fed chicken soup by the hotel staff. His mother apparently gave that to him when he was a little boy, and it always seemed to have a restorative effect on him. So the hotel is giving him chicken soup, and he's really sorry that he can't be here. I'm sorry too. So instead of getting the current president of the International Diabetes Federation, you're getting one of the past presidents instead. So without any further ado, Sana, can I introduce you to tell us about this afternoon session?
Thank you so much. I don't need this. I have my thing on. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Sir Michael Hurst, for helping me relax a little bit by giving a nice welcoming note. So as Sir Michael Hurst told you, my name is Sana Ajmal. I'm a person living with type 1 diabetes, and I have been active in the diabetes advocacy space since 2011. And I was just telling Baroness May that when she was the Prime Minister, I was at a diabetes camp in the UK. This is like 10, 11 years ago. And me and Gavin and some of our friends, we were outside 10 Downing Street and shouting at the top of our voices, Theresa May, why don't you come out? We want to talk to you. We want to talk to you. And her security personnel were laughing at us and enjoying. But I'm so happy that she's here today, and you're a huge inspiration for all of us. So thank you for coming. And not just Theresa, because for all of you to come here, to listen to us, because it is so, so, so important that policymakers, diabetes community, we sit down together. We try to understand each other's perspectives. We try to understand how we can shape policies that matter to the community. So this is why this forum is very, very, very important. And I would like to thank my co-chair, PDGN's co-chairs, so Michael, John Burwis, Christelle Ikata, for making this happen. And of course, to our sponsors, without whom this was not possible. But before we start, again, a huge thank you to the government of Malta, because they have shown such huge support for this forum. It wasn't possible without their help. So as we know, PDGN is a network of serving parliamentarians across the globe who are champions for diabetes advocacy, diabetes policymaking in their countries. So thank you all you do, thanks to all of you for all you do for us in your countries. And we are going to make this forum very special, because this is going to be an interaction between you and the community. So lots is happening today. Today is World Diabetes Day, as you all know. 14th of November is the birthday of Sir Frederick Banting, who was the discoverer of insulin along with other scientists. And we all know that insulin was a breakthrough in diabetes. I wouldn't be alive without it. Many of us here would not be alive without it. Can I have a show of hands, like how many people with diabetes do we have at this forum? Well, thank you for being here. Yes. And this makes it special, you know, because you feel it and you know it, and probably your worries are much more than the person themselves. Today, there's a lot happening around the world. I would like to say that Align T1D, which is a big initiative of Breakthrough T1D, has just launched less than an hour ago. And there's lots and lots of awareness sessions, advocacy sessions happening around the world. But this session is very, very special because this year, the theme set by IDF is diabetes stigma at workplace. And in line with that session, we are going to have this panel discussion. We're going to discuss the stigma at the workplace and how it affects well-being of people with diabetes in their workplaces. So I would want to introduce the speakers here. Somebody who needs no introduction, Theresa May, Baroness May, can you please join us on the stage? She's a person living with type 1 diabetes and the former Prime Minister of UK, for if anyone does not know, but I do not need to say that. Okay, we're going to be joined by, to replace Peter Schatz, who is down with, hopefully it's not COVID, but who's down. So Jackie Malouf, who is the Vice President of IDF, is going to fill in for Peter. So Jackie's serving her second term as the IDF Vice President. She's also the president of Dialab in Lebanon, and she's also a board member of the NCD Alliance. Thank you, Jackie, for coming here.
Thank you.
And as you've yourself used, a mother of a working adult daughter with type 1 diabetes. So this is very, very special for you, okay. Then we'll have Ana Alvarez. I always mispronounce her name. Ana is the head of scientific relations at dedoc, the impact coordinator at Enodia, the member of IDF Blue Circle Voices. She has a long list. Board member of ADM, the Diabetes Association of Madrid, and a person living with type 1 diabetes herself as well. So, should we start? I can take the seat. Okay. Okay. So we have three very powerful ladies on the stage today. So Peter's sickness worked out well, you know? Okay. So before we begin, I would like to talk about a little bit about how stigma affects people with diabetes. I'm a person with diabetes. You all are here are affected by diabetes in one way or another, right? We're persons, we're caregivers, and we have faced stigma everywhere. In societies, in our friend circles, from the health professionals, in the health systems, at universities, at colleges, at schools, and at workplaces. But it's especially very exhausting when it happens at a workplace. To me personally, I feel like it's a very exhausting thing to deal with. So my first question, I would begin with you, Baroness May. As a person living with type 1 diabetes and as a policymaker, do you think being open about your condition has helped, or was it more difficult to deal with?
Well, I hope, and good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that being open about living with the condition is actually something that has helped and that has shown other people that they don't have to hide their diabetes, that they can actually be upfront about it. But I think there is, sadly, one of the issues with the stigma of diabetes is that so many people who don't suffer from diabetes or who don't have a family member or somebody they know who has diabetes, they don't understand what it is. And I think this is one of the great issues that we have to deal with. Most people don't know there are two types of diabetes. Actually, there are more than two types of diabetes, of course, but the main ones of type 1 and type 2. And most people just think, you know, if I had money for every time somebody has said to me, oh, don't worry, you can eat that, there's no sugar in it. I say, it's not just about sugar. And people have this image of what diabetes is about and don't understand it. And I think that's one of the problems. But I think you talk about stigma in the workplace. If I may just inject another thought, I think the other problem is for young people. And if a school, for example, isn't properly equipped to deal with somebody who has diabetes, then it can be incredibly difficult for them in that environment. So we need to open people's eyes, get more people to be aware of what this is, what it means, and particularly how people can live very happily with this. This isn't something, oh dear, you've got diabetes. No, we're all, we live very happily with diabetes. We do all sorts of things. But just some adjustments need to be made in schools, in colleges, in workplaces.
So when you started your career as a politician and were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, did this thought ever cross your mind whether I should talk about it or not? And what helped you open up?
Well, this is going to get a little bit awkward because I'm giving a speech tomorrow about my journey through diabetes. And I will talk about some of these things tomorrow. But it was because I wasn't diagnosed until quite late. I was already a government minister when I was diagnosed. And initially I didn't reveal it. And then for various reasons, I thought that it was important to come forward and to explain, partly because of adjustments that were having to be made around me to make sure that, for example, if I went to a big dinner, there was one occasion where I went to a dinner, I'd injected before, because I still inject, I don't have a pump, I'd injected before I went into the dinner, and suddenly the host decided to change the timing of everything, so that the speeches all came first, and we weren't supposed to be going to be eating for about another 45 minutes to an hour. So, after that, my team knew, make sure there's a bread roll at the place. So if that happens again, there's something to eat. So it's little things like that people were having to adjust to.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Jackie, can we have you talk about, because I'm aware that for this World Diabetes Day theme, in line with the theme, IDF has run a survey to find out how people with diabetes feel at their workplaces. Can you share some of the key stats and what do they say about people's experiences around the world?
Thank you, Sana. I'm happy to be here, but sad to be here instead of Peter. I don't believe I'm here to replace him. I'm here to try and do my best to represent the International Diabetes Federation as Vice President the best I can, and of course wishing Peter well. And good afternoon, everyone, and maybe good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the people who are joining through the live stream. I want to start by saying, before I speak the numbers, who sometimes are much stronger than words. When you give some statistics, you don't need to explain that much. So why stigma? Some people might say, why are you talking about stigma at work? Who's stigmatizing people living with diabetes at work? Well, I'm the mother of a young lady, adult, working, and living with diabetes. And I know that she's strong enough to face it, but unfortunately not everyone is, and not everyone is ready. So for that purpose, we at the International Diabetes Federation ran a survey so far on 1,400 people from 7 countries. Of course, this does not represent the world, but we'd like to think that this is a global survey, and by the way, it's still open. The link will be shared, and the more info and input we get, the more solid information and statistics we get. But for the time being, I would just highlight a few numbers that 40% of employees living with diabetes report negative treatment at work. This is a very high percentage per se. We don't need to say more about that. And also 1 in 3 have considered leaving their jobs. No wonder we are talking about stigma at the workplace. They miss out on promotions sometimes. They have to hide their conditions sometimes because of the fear of missing out on a promotion, because unfortunately there is still a thought that you cannot deliver, you cannot perform the same or equally if you are living with diabetes, which is very far from the truth if there is understanding and no stigma at the workplace. I will go very quickly over a few numbers, and forgive me for that. I like more to be spontaneous, but we need to look at the numbers to better understand why this so interesting presence here, and I really appreciate your comments, Baronessa, and being here as well, because at the end of the day, we are not here to speak our opinions only. We are here to be the voices of every single person living with diabetes across the globe. So this is a responsibility. This is a duty that we have to fulfill, especially when we know that 1 in 10 employees living with diabetes have not disclosed that they are living with diabetes at their workplace. And I think we all know very well what that entails. If I'm living with diabetes and I have a hypo and my colleagues and my coworkers and the staff at the work environment where I am, they don't know what I'm living with, this is a life-threatening issue. So it's very important why we are discussing about this. And also, through this survey, what we would like to do at the International Diabetes Federation is call upon companies, employers, and also policymakers. And I see several here, even from my own country, from Lebanon. And I will hold you on that presence. Whenever we go back to Beirut, you're going to receive me at your offices, and we're going to do something about this. Thank you. Thank you. So this is important because many policies need to be set in place. We will discuss that further later on, so I don't take the time from my distinguished speakers around me here. But this is the purpose of the survey, to know the reality of the working people living with diabetes. And this is a huge number of them. And also my daughter was diagnosed at a later age. So sometimes you are already in the workforce, you get diagnosed, and all your life is turning upside down. And one of them is at the workplace. So there is also the fear of injecting insulin in front of colleagues. So many things around this topic that we want to tackle. And that's why our call upon all the companies and the policymakers to really set strict and clear and achievable policies to help every person, working person, living with diabetes to have a better quality of life, not only at home, but at work, because they spend 8 hours a day at work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was very insightful. And also thinking about that a huge number of people with diabetes are all working adults. So this is an issue that we really need to tackle. I'll move on to Anna. Anna, you hear stories because you work with Inodia and dedoc. So you hear voices, you hear stories from all over the globe. Can you think about how can we put, and so Jackie has just talked about numbers, and you have got a very human approach, a very different approach to all this. So how do we blend this in together? How can people's stories become structured frameworks for change?
That's true. We forgot to mention that I also moderate several peer support groups, and we hear hundreds of stories of what's going on in their lives as parents, as children, as family, but also what happens at work. And all stories are very diverse and complex, but they all point in the same direction. There's stigma in the workplace. There's silence. Stigma thrives in silence. People don't talk. People don't share. And that silence is embedded in the structures, in the work structures, in the communication, in the HR structures. People don't come clean, which sounds awful, but that's what they do. They don't come clean about their diabetes, and they hide it. And this is done in many different ways. It's as simple as going to a job interview and removing your pump, hiding your sensor, keeping your hands out of sight because you don't want anybody to see your calloused fingertips after finger pricking 10 times every day for 10, 20 years. There's also the employee who avoids asking for time to check their glucose because that looks not professional, and it might provide or convey the image of unreliable. They need to stop working. In an office situation, that can be managed, but people involved in manual work or factory, truck drivers, you name it, it's even harder for them. And then we have the other side of the coin, the manager or the HR who recommends not to give a promotion to someone because of the fear of potential complications going forward, or sick days, or asking for time off for medical appointments, or asking for accommodations in the office space. I always considered myself to be very lucky, very fortunate to live in a country where I had access to technology, to insulin, to everything I needed to manage my condition. And I still do. I am very fortunate. But for many years, and with a young family, I did lots of freelance work. I didn't have a boss to answer to. But now, looking backwards, I realize that it was reflex or reverse stigma, because I avoided engagements where my management would be compromised or where I would be seen as unreliable, so I reduced the scope of my work. Then I moved on to the diabetes space full-time, and I realized what inclusion really means. And it means showing up at work and being able to be yourself, not to explain what's going on. Everybody knows. I wear a pump, I wear a sensor. If I go low, I just say, sorry, I need a few minutes, apologies. And that's about it. So I discovered that true inclusion actually is not about special treatment, but about being able to be yourself in the workplace, in your life, with your friends, wherever you are.
Thank you so much. That's powerful. I remember a story from my country, Pakistan, where I remember there was a delivery boy who had type 1 diabetes, and he needed insulin, and he needed a break in between sometimes to eat and to take his insulin, and he could not. He ended up in a very, very bad hypo because of this. But where we have people who have job insecurity, this becomes harder. This becomes harder. But thank you for raising this very important point. I'll go to Baroness May once again. So at the end of the day, the employers are part of the public, they're part of the society, and it's the society's perception, actually, that probably feeds into the biases that they may have against people with diabetes as employees. So what, in your opinion, is the role of visibility and policy in shaping the public perception so that as a society and then as employers in turn, we can have more inclusive and less stigmatizing experiences for people with diabetes?
Well, I think that visibility is terribly important, and I think education about what diabetes is very important. I think once people understand diabetes a little more and understand that actually, although you might just need those few minutes if you're having a hypo, or you just need to be able to go out and take your insulin before you eat, or whatever the issue is, this is not threatening a business. This is not damaging what the business is doing. It is just ensuring that an employee can give of their best in the workplace. And one of the things I would say is I think often the best way to persuade employers, to persuade businesses to actually be aware of these issues and accommodate them is to show the business case. And the business case is that if your worker who has diabetes is able to accommodate their diabetes in the workplace, you will have a happier worker, you will have somebody who is more productive, and your business will benefit from that. And sometimes we just have to think about how we can craft the argument so that it appeals to what is going to... So it isn't just about you should be looking after your workers, which obviously they should be doing, but it's actually, this has an impact on your business. And understanding what somebody needs in the workplace, which for a type 1 diabetic is actually most often very little, just that awareness, but understanding the impact that can have on the productivity, on the way in which that worker feels towards that company and is able to give of their best. And therefore the impact, the positive impact it has on the business, I think is important.
Oh, yes, okay. So is there any legislation that we can look into for this particular thing? Because, as you said, it's not just about taking care of your worker, which can come in as a legislation, but can visibility help, or do we have to go with the legislation part? So my question here was more about, how do we make employees actually. A problem specifically in low and middle income countries is that many people don't have access to the right treatment. And even if the employer is willing to accommodate, they do go through very difficult time managing their diabetes, and that's what affects the business. So to make that case, do you think legislation can help through better access and through better treatments maybe, or other ways? I mean, I'm just trying to think out of loud.
My own view, as a former government minister, prime minister, and legislator, and still a legislator in our second chamber in the UK, is that you have to be quite careful around legislation, because what you don't want is to legislate in a way that means the employer is less likely to employ the individual because they're worried about what they're going to have to accommodate. So I think, if you like, education almost needs to come first. Now, it may be that at some stage you do need to go down the legislative route, and obviously there are examples of legislation, equality acts and so forth, that will include diabetes within the characteristics. There are other areas where you can legislate to require companies to take certain actions. But what you don't want is to put in place legislation which means that the employer thinks twice before they employ that individual with diabetes, rather than saying that's the right person to employ and I can accommodate their needs in my workplace.
Okay, that's very insightful. Thank you so much for sharing this. Jackie, moving on to you. So what do you think is to address the stigma at workplace? What's the role of the registries and accurate data? Are they essential to promote workplace inclusion?
Yes, thank you for that question. But first of all, I'd like to come back to something you said, Teresa, earlier about schools. Although we are talking about the workplace, we need never to forget that those school students are the workforce of tomorrow. So if we start that education at a school age, this is an automatic outcome that will help us through the education. I just had this comment in mind. And I'd like to say, through my work at Dialab, which is the foundation I founded with my daughter in Lebanon, which has been working for 15 years now, educating and doing training, the program that I have most dear to my heart is the support group, where we have a safe space to discuss things. And I cannot tell you the kind of stories we hear in those support groups. Sometimes little things would prevent those dramatic stories from happening. Very little things, as in knowledge, a little knowledge about what is diabetes, what is type 1, what is type 2. So, and being the mother of a working daughter, she is fortunate. She says it all the time. She's very fortunate. Yet she would like to be seen as a professional living with diabetes, not simply a person living with diabetes telling her story. And you know what? As a mother, that shocked me, because I failed to understand it myself at the beginning. And it wasn't until she said, "Mom, stop telling me, talk about your diabetes only to share the story. Use my professionalism. Tell me to speak as a professional about my diabetes. Then I would be more than happy to share whatever you want." So sometimes even us, where we think we have enough knowledge, enough education, enough feel and see the other person living with diabetes, we fail at a certain point. So we need to really think of those details. And we need to think how that affects the safety as well. We mentioned it earlier, but it affects the safety of the person. And you mentioned something crucial, that the productivity. So people living with diabetes are not a burden on the GDP of a country. They are a productive force if we give them what they need, which is a little understanding, no more than that. They are a productive force and they can be really, and I like to believe that we are tapping on this force, but yet not enough. It will be maybe good enough when we understand them better, when we give them a safe work environment to be in, so they can show us how productive they can be. I'll go now to your second point, which is about the diabetes registries. In some point, I got to think that it is a taboo. Every time we talk about the registries, everybody agrees, and then nothing happens. I don't know why. Why is it that we cannot have, and I'm not generalizing, maybe in some countries it's there, but trust me, from my experience, from South America, from the Middle East, from the United States, it's not there. There is not a unified diabetes registry. What that will do, it will save us duplication of work. It will help us understand how many people we have with type 1 diabetes, with type 2 diabetes. But unfortunately, there are many barriers to that. But if we think of how important it is to have a clear registry, I think all the parliamentarians and people at decision-making positions would thrive really to join hands with the NGOs working on diabetes, with the ministries related, maybe Ministry of Work, maybe Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of Education, so we know what we have in hand. And in every country, the Ministry of Public Health, they have their primary health care centers. If we have enough support from the medical societies in passing on the information, I think we can have very clear and complete diabetes registries. We can build on it, we can leverage on that information to really set clear steps forward from that point. So it is really important to have a reliable data and to start from there. So I would like to encourage all of you in the decision-making positions who kindly joined us today to think of that and to, in your own countries, try and have this unified diabetes registry, as it helps us all, and most of all, it helps the people living with diabetes. Because again, if we are gathered here, if we are talking about this, our ultimate goal is not just to state our opinions, it is to be the voice or the voices of those living with diabetes who have invested these responsibilities on our shoulder. And I like to think that we're trying to do a good job, but again, I like to think that it's never enough. We need to thrive more, we need to work more, especially in regards to the diabetes registries. Thank you.
Also, the registries often don't contain the softer elements. They're more about how many people with type 1, how many people with type 2, who lives where, who has complications. It doesn't talk about factors like stigma, factors like your experiences. So that's a very interesting thought about how to include these elements in the registries.
Right, and that's another call to all of you to spread the word about the survey that the International Diabetes Federation is having. It's still open, and again, the link will be shared. Please spread it in your countries. Let us have thousands and hundreds of thousands of replies so we know what exactly we are up against.
Thank you, Jackie. Anna, so you, again, I'll come back to you hear people from all over the globe, right? What are the barriers, the key barriers in addressing stigma at workplace that you hear about?
Well, I hear about lots of them. But before I go into that, and going into the not focus on the diabetes alone, I usually use a phrase when we're discussing this, that is, I'm a lot more than a dysfunctional pancreas. Mm-hmm. So look at me, I'm a person with all my weaknesses, with all my strengths, and I try to put my strengths to good use. But But remember, we're much more than our diabetes. And going into the barriers can be summarized into basically three. One is silence. The first one is silence. People are afraid of disclosing their diabetes. And I mean in the workplace mainly. Because past experiences have taught them that sharing, being open, usually is a risk and not a relief. The second barrier is fear, closely related to silence. Because we fear being seen as unreliable, unfit, fragile, costly. And of course, there are going to be fewer possibilities, fewer opportunities going forward, especially for young professionals. And there's lack of understanding that ties very closely with education, letting people know what diabetes is really about. And it takes so little to accommodate a few things to make the work environment easier for everybody. But as a rule, colleagues, managers, HR, they don't know how little it takes to properly manage diabetes and how flexible work policies can make inclusion accessible to all. Of course, it depends on what type of work you do, and the country you live in is very, very important. This is a zip code, really mandates so many things. But these barriers are universal, from Germany to Ghana, Spain to Sao Paulo, Portugal to Pakistan. The barriers are the same. And we hear all sorts of stories about these unmet needs. But we can do something about this. We can try at least to put in place certain things like protecting rights, and through appropriate legislation, not the type of legislation that turns against you, because that's a risk. Let's not hire this person. She's got diabetes, and it happened to me not a long time ago. No, the process is over, because that person is a risk. So we need these anti-discrimination laws in place, but properly explained, properly enacted. This way, and we also need to create safe methods, processes for, and confidential of course, to disclose existing diabetes or any chronic disease. This has been done with other diseases. We still have diabetes to finalize, but being open about your condition, your disease, is a right. It shouldn't be a risk. We also need to ensure equitable access to treatment and technology all over the world. Because if this is not properly done, we are discriminating against people. Equal access to insulin, glucose meters, tech, if possible. That would be ideal for everybody to have a sensor. Sorry, I'm a tech fan, so yeah, I'm wearing 2 sensors right now. But this is not a health issue, it's an equity issue. And it goes hand in hand with fighting stigma in the workplace. And we need to create registers, dashboards, to follow up and have proper information on inclusion, rates, absenteeism, access to diabetes technology by region and gender, which is also relevant. Yeah. And because what's not measured stays invisible, and what is invisible cannot be changed. I'm going to share afterwards the other.
Thank you so much, Anna. Yeah, I was going to say, I'll come to Jackie before I come back.
Can I add just one thing, sorry, about this topic and the invisibility? 2 days ago, there was a World Diabetes Day webinar online, and I was participating, and so was my daughter, and another lady from India who is living with type 1 diabetes. They were talking with each others, and the question was, how do you think we can create more understanding? So Sylvie, my daughter, answered, I see you and you see me. This is a good start. Imagine that sometimes they feel invisible, not as a person. Of course, physically, you look and you see them. But by I see you, it means I understand what you have to go through every day, from 200 decision-making, carb counting, insulin injections, counting units, and checking your insulin, and thinking what you're going to eat. On top of it, if you are working with your responsibilities, this is so much to really handle. So remember the sentence. I personally found it extremely powerful. Let's see the people living with diabetes, especially at the workplace, and understand them. That was my additional comment.
Thank you, Jackie. I want to share so many stories from Pakistan, because when we work on ground with Meethi Zindagi, the organization that I run in Pakistan, there are so many sometimes heartbreaking stories that come in, specifically from small villages, smaller cities. And when you're talking at the platform this high, I often think about how can what we're talking about translate to actually on-ground action for those people. So what, in your opinion, Jackie, what are the kind of policies that could be adopted to support people with diabetes? What are the key steps, in your opinion, for inclusion?
Well, if we talk about global steps, I don't think those are going to be implemented in a proper way, because every country has its own local context, from how the policies are done to how they are being implemented. So let me talk about Lebanon, my own country, and having here my two ladies who are dear good friends, parliamentarians. I would think starting with a diabetes registry. I've said that on so many occasions at the ministries, and yet I don't see that happening. So this is something we need to start working on. Education is going, it's happening. We need to just reinforce it. And not only involving the Ministry of Public Health, we need to involve the Ministry of Work, and also hand in hand with them, and also the Ministry of Education and Economy, because as I mentioned earlier, this big segment of the population, workforce, living with diabetes, they're not a burden. They are a productive force. And also work on mandate reasonable. This is something you mentioned, Theresa May. We don't want something unattainable. What for? Just to have sublime words written out there. We don't want that. We want attainable goals and attainable policies. So for example, flexible breaks for glucose checks. How much does that cost a company? Glucose checking is like 30 seconds. Eating a snack is like a minute, 60 seconds. This person will regain energy and will be much more productive after that break. Flexibility during hypoglycemia episodes. This is so important. It can be in the middle of a meeting. Hypoglycemia does not request permission to happen. The person starts sweating, maybe shaking. We need to understand that. I mean, none of us knows what lies in tomorrow. I can get diabetes tomorrow. I've seen it happening at 70, at 80, at 60. There is no age any longer. And those of you who are medical doctors, they know very well that juvenile diabetes is not used anymore, because type 1 diabetes, my daughter was 24 when she was diagnosed. You mentioned you were already in the Congress when it happened. So there's no age any longer. So we need to tackle that and to encourage the awareness campaigns. I've repeatedly asked for support. Sometimes it's there, but not enough. Sometimes non-existent. So again, me personally, you can hold me to my word. When I go back to my country, I'm going to call upon my ministers. I'm going to call for a meeting, whoever is. I call myself a soldier on the ground for diabetes. So we need to gather those frontliners and see how you can use what we can do. We are the workforce on the ground in relation to diabetes. If you set some policies. We are in charge of implementing them. You do your job at the parliament. We do our job in implementing it with your support, with your policies. So I wanted to also say something that called my attention. In the survey that the International Diabetes Federation did, and looking at the numbers, I didn't want to burden you with mentioning too many numbers. You can see some shocking numbers coming from Pakistan, India, and the United States. So let's not think low middle income country, low income country, developed countries, underdeveloped countries. There is no umbrella for what is happening. All the countries, developed, underdeveloped, everybody is facing stigma. This is why the urgency of this topic. This is why this meeting is extremely important. This is why your roles as parliamentarians, as congresspeople, as wherever you are in the decision-making process, it's extremely important because it's happening everywhere and it affects the economy of all of our countries. Furthermore, it affects the persons, the people we care about. So we need to really do those steps. And I gave one example. I had prepared others, but again, for sake of time, I will stick to mentioning what I mentioned. They might be replicated and work in other countries, but I believe that we need to be very mindful of the local context, of the local system in each country in order to make it attainable and the implementation smooth and easy.
I so wish we had MPs from Pakistan and India and USA here today to hear this. The two MPs from Pakistan who had to come had to cancel. We did not have anyone from the USA, and India also canceled long ago. So we really need to send them these statistics, you know, and to work on this. But let's work on this.
Can I add one more thing? Speaking about the USA, I was there. I happen to be also a US citizen, and I had the honor to participate at a day at the American Congress where we went to ask for policies for people living with diabetes in the US. And that's where I found your friends, Mickey. So we'll talk about that later. So it called my attention that oftentimes I think of us, very small country in Lebanon, and it's somehow understandable to have all these barriers. Well, guess what? The barriers, the challenges, the problems are even at a major scale in the US. And I'm starting to know more about that. And unfortunately, the government was in shutdown, so we met with the assistants of the legislative people. But at least we told them what were our points, and they were specific laws. I'm not going to go into that we were requesting specific decisions in that regard. So yes, all the world globally is facing those challenges, and this is why unity is very important, and equity and equality in the treatment of the people living with diabetes is mandatory. It's not an option.
It's a World Diabetes Day, so we're all united under the blue circle today. So, thank you for saying that. I'll go to Theresa May, and Theresa, please guide us about this. How do parliamentarians, how can they make disclosure safe? Because we heard from Anna about the barriers, and we heard from Jackie about the barriers, and they seem to revolve around disclosure and this sense of being discriminated against. So how can parliamentarians make disclosure safe and implement some of the key policy levers that Anna talked about in her answer? So I'm sorry I'm coming to you later, so, but I hope that if you don't remember, Anna can chip in.
Well, thank you. Well, I mean, I think one of the first things is that parliamentarians with diabetes need to stand up and say they have diabetes and be role models for others. I think that's a key thing. And I would compare the issue around mental health in the UK, where one of my former parliamentary colleagues, Charles Walker, a few years, and not that many years ago, actually stood up and in a speech in the House of Commons said he'd had mental health problems, and it transformed the atmosphere at which people were talking about this issue. because they recognized that this was not something that other people had. This was something that colleagues had dealt with. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why I wanted to be open about my diabetes. And interestingly, following that, a number of other parliamentarians came up to me and said, well, yes, actually, I'm a type 2 or a type 1 diabetic, and but hadn't previously been talking about it. So I think parliamentarians can be a role model, as well as ensuring that there is a policy in place that is going to deal with this. But I come back, and I'm sorry, because I know we've been talking about specific policy levers and legislation, but I do think that it's awareness that absolutely needs to lie at the heart of this. The employer who understands diabetes is the employer who will not be frightened about diabetes, and the employer who will not worry about their employee with diabetes. And it's important for employees, for workers in the workplace, to feel free, as we've said, not to feel that they have to be silent because there's a risk, but also because if the people around them don't know what this is, then there's a risk that they start, treating them oddly, or they're worry about what this means. So that awareness, I think, is hugely important. And can I just pick up, because Anna said the phrase that she uses. I was very struck by something that was said by Sir Stephen Redgrave. Steve Redgrave is a British oarsman, a rower. He won gold medals in 5 consecutive Olympic Games. He has diabetes, and Steve Redgrave said, diabetes has to learn to live with me rather than me living with diabetes.
Wow. That's so powerful. That's so powerful. Any of you, just going to come back to any of you, you can take that question. How do we empower young advocates to lead stigma-free workspaces? And I'll talk about this from a personal experience as well, because when I started my advocacy journey, my major aim was peer support, providing, connecting with the community, providing them the empowerment to be able to feel good about themselves. And I would post pictures of my hypoglycemic episodes, sharing experiences, just to make them feel like, okay, it's normal. If she can have it, it's okay to have a hypo, it's okay to have a hyper. But stigma came in to me first as an advocate, because I was told again and again and again that you're an advocate, you need to be the perfect diabetic, you should not be sharing these things. How do we empower young advocates to lead stigma-free workplaces?
I would like to mention first, since you mentioned the mental health, the strong relationship between stigma at work and mental health. And I think we're all aware about the high-level meeting that happened in New York, and I was present there. So many talks about mental health. But if we go to the root cause of the issue, one of it for people living with diabetes is what they face at the workplace. It is the reason for them having many mental challenges, and we can avoid that easily. So coming back to our youth, as I mentioned earlier, they are the workforce of tomorrow. And I have few points on how we can empower them to become this force, to fight diabetes and diabetes stigma. First of all, we need to equip them with evidence-based education. Having this passion to be a diabetes advocate is great, but it's not enough. You need to have the knowledge and to know exactly what you are talking about. The second point would be to create meaningful platform for them and for their voices. There are, yes, many platforms, many powerful ones. I really want to say that the International Diabetes Federation is one of them, through the Blue Circle Voices, through the Young Leaders in Diabetes, such an amazing program, and how we support through it the young people and empower them and give them capacity building as well to build, which is my third point, to build their leadership skills. You need skills. You can't just go with your passion, with your emotions, because I'm living with diabetes and that is enough. That is my drive. That is my passion. But I need to polish it. I need to strengthen and empower myself through building those leadership skills so I can be heard, I can be seen. Also, to celebrate and amplify their contributions. Not very often we see that happening. We are trying to do as much as we can, but we need to celebrate the success of those young people in order to give them enough confidence in tomorrow and to build the advocates we want to see, and also connect them to global and regional platforms. At every international event where I am present, I have someone approach me and say, I want to do something for other people with diabetes. How can I do that? And they don't know. They don't even know that in their own countries there are diabetes organizations. So there is a lot to be done related to young people in order to empower them. And this is not an option. We have to empower them because they are an untapped force at this point, and they can be a huge force if they are well-trained, if they build their leadership skills, if they know what they're doing, if they can have enough self-confidence to go on a TV program, to go at a school, at university. I can tell you one small example. Our current young leader in diabetes, Pedro, and you met him, we were talking about him, an amazing young man. I've been at a university where I was requested to speak, and I insisted, please give me 10 minutes to have the voice of a lived experience. And they were like, no, maybe the students will be affected. Excuse me, affected as in what? My daughter was in university when she was diagnosed. It can happen to them tomorrow. So I fought very hard, and he went with me. I spoke 45 minutes because under their request, and when Pedro spoke, oh my God, you should see the effect of him standing there holding his insulin pen. Amazing. Sorry. This is what we need to do with our youth. Give them the floor.
You're absolutely right. He's an amazing young man. He is a very caring young man, always looking after everybody else around him. It's part of what we were talking about. It's raising awareness. It's educating not only our people, our advocates, but also educating our healthcare professionals, our employers, our parliamentarians, everybody, on what diabetes actually is. And we have come a long way since juvenile diabetes and adult onset diabetes and insulin dependent, which was treatment. It has nothing to do with the type of diabetes you have. But we have to go beyond the stories, beyond the anecdotes, and embed this education, this empowerment into the co-creation of policies, both at parliamentarian level and also in the workspace. You know, if someone has diabetes and they're employed by a company, they can sit down with HR and work out what the protocol is. What are we going to do when this happens, when the other thing, what can happen? What is not acceptable? So it's not just participation, it's co-creation. It's being an integral part of the solution. We have to embed lived experience in everything we do. And in ODIA we do. We have every panel, every expert panel with researchers usually has at least one, maybe two lived experience representatives to add to. We don't, I always say, I like the science, I understand the science, but I don't do science. But I can give an opinion on certain aspects. So this lived experience turns into structure. It goes beyond mere awareness because, again, awareness campaigns and empathy workshops, they work beautifully, but they fade away. If we create structures around this, the structures remain. Easier said than done, but we can train our young people to actually put it in practice.
Theresa May, can structures help us change? Do you want to add to this question first?
Well, I wanted just to pick up something that has just been said, and it may be slightly going off topic, but we talk about educating employers and general awareness, but you mentioned healthcare professionals, and I think this is often forgotten, actually. Everybody assumes that people in healthcare all know about diabetes, but I've heard, even in the UK, I'm very lucky with the treatment I get and access to everything that I need. But I've heard stories in the UK of people with diabetes going into hospital for other conditions, expecting operations, having to have operations, for example, and the nurses not having the faintest idea about the diabetes. And indeed, one person who is a friend who was actively having to argue, beating her head against the brick wall of arguing with the nurse about the number of units of insulin that she should take, because the nurse just thought she knew best, but really didn't know anything about it. And then there are the other issues. So I did a parliamentary report with a fellow MP from a different party, from the Labour Party, but on type 1 and eating disorders, and making sure that healthcare professionals who don't deal with people with diabetes understand the impact that if somebody has diabetes on other conditions that they have. And the lived experience we heard from the evidence we took was that all too often, if you had an eating disorder, you were treated for the eating disorder, and they forgot about the diabetes. And the diabetes consultants, on the other hand, often didn't understand the eating disorder, and neither of them understood the mental health aspects of this. And so you had individuals being told on the one hand that they had to eat, and they had to keep eating, and on the other hand, trying to manage their eating because of their diabetes, and just completely finding it so difficult. And this is, in a country which I think deals pretty well with diabetes, but yet we still have these issues. So that education has to go beyond the employers and so forth, but just even those who you expect to know, you need to make sure they know.
So that means there are silos. We're working
Absolutely.
in silos, and we need to break those silos, and we need to include the health professionals and people and policymakers on one table. Well, that's super powerful. I wanted to ask, how do you think that structures, which Anna was mentioning, can they change the corporate culture from just tolerance, like you were saying, like, number one, we don't want to have legislation that will make employers not employ a person with diabetes, but at the same time, if we do legislation right and there's no discrimination, but they're still just tolerating, versus how can we use these structures to help employers include people with diabetes? How can structures help shift from tolerance to inclusion?
Well, I think it's important in the workplace for the people to know that there is, I might use the word process rather than structure, but that if somebody admits and says that they are diabetic, that they know who they can go to, they know if there's an issue, what they can do. So there's a structure in that sense and a process in that sense. I think, but again, it's a bit like the legislation. What you don't want to do is to require companies to have structures which then become a structure for its own sake, rather than for the purpose of supporting people with diabetes. And this is one of the difficulties always, is to make sure that what is done genuinely with the interests of the people you are trying to help, and not simply in the interests of somebody sitting in a management position being able to say, tick, we've done that, we've got a policy, we've got a structure, we don't need to have to worry. because it's not about having the structure or having the policy, it's about how you then deliver on it that matters for those who actually are living with diabetes.
Thank you so much.
If I were to add to this, I will go back to schools where we are educating the students who are going to be the CEOs of tomorrow, the HR managers of tomorrow. So if we start embedding the culture of inclusion rather than tolerance, why tolerance? I don't need you to tolerate me. I need you to see me, to understand me, and to make me feel included by all means in the workplace, wherever in society. So if we start with this change, because this is a process, the most difficult thing to change is mindset. And if we want to do that, we need to work on a shift in the mindset. We need to do a system change. And this is one of the hardest things, yet it's not impossible. So this is what we need to do and start as early as possible. In nutrition, we say, when do you start teaching the person how to eat? I personally say when he or she, they are a fetus in the mother's womb. This is how early things should start. So if we start at school, embedding this culture of accepting, of understanding, of inclusiveness, that we are equally to be treated and we need to understand others, especially in the case of people living with diabetes. And I've had this experience in Lebanon where we have visited over 200 schools now, where some schools have no nurse. So somebody living with diabetes go to the school and she would give paracetamol or something for headache. Because there's no nurse, there's someone there acting nurse. So this is one of the things, my fellow Lebanese parliamentarians, we can make sure every school has a nurse. We can make sure the canteen of the school, that's another issue, I'm going off subject, but it's something that really I hold dear to my heart. But again, start as early as possible with the mindset shift in order to really put that acceptance, that inclusion in the mindset of the youth, the children who are going to be our future workforce. This is how I think the best way to achieve the desired change without much effort, because they will be prepared to be understanding, to be accepting, and so on.
Well, thank you. Anna, you want to say something before I take some questions?
Just one tiny
Okay.
little anecdote, because it has to do with dismantling misconceptions. And it's not only diabetes. As women, we know what happens in the workplace. And this is an anecdote from that. It's a businesswoman. She's a renowned chef in Argentina. And I heard an interview a few days ago where this thing about hiring women, they get pregnant, they have to stay home, the kids, this and the other thing. And she had her accountant pull the numbers to say, okay, where are the leaves of absence? Who has cost me more money? Older women, younger women, men, whatever. The outcome was something nobody had expected. Most of the leaves of absence had been taken by men and due to football injuries. So let's fight misconceptions.
Power of data. If you guys have any burning question, okay, there are burning questions, because I have a few burning questions where I'll display a QR code here for you all to input, but we can maybe move the mic around. Is this color mic not working, Chris? Are the color mics not working here? No, they were not working. That's why they handed it over. So we'll have to, do we have another mic to pass around? Okay. Okay, so who has the most burning question? Emma.
I have the mic.
Can you stand up? So can I ask you to please stand up and make sure, before you ask your question, please make sure you are introducing yourselves and you have the mic. And to who the question is, directed to at least one panelist or leave it open. But please have the mic, because this whole session is being live streamed on International Diabetes Federation, dedoc, and PDGN websites. So people will not be able to hear you if you start your question without a mic.
Okay, so this question is for Baroness May. So my name is Emma Clateman, and I am representing Life for a Child. And now we know that stigma is fueled by shame, and shame is such a common thread. And it's not just about stigma in the workplace, it can be about stigma in families. And in low and middle income countries, we hear all of the time terrifying, horrible stories within families about how stigma takes shapes and really changes the life course for especially young women with diabetes, especially in South Asia. So I'm not really looking for answers on this, but perhaps just some reflections rather on how I guess we can stop looking at stigma in silos and how stigma eradication is something that needs to be seen on a wider societal level.
Do you want to go?
It was posed at me. Well, you've raised an issue which is a whole lot wider than the simple question of stigma in diabetes in the workplace. You're right, there are some communities and there are some parts of the world. I would say there are some, probably some communities in all parts of the world actually, where unfortunately they perceive something being in some sense physically wrong with somebody as automatically providing a stigma and meaning that individual cannot achieve what they want to achieve. But as we've just heard, actually, this isn't just about a physical issue, a health issue. Culture around the world means that very often people of certain types, and women have seen this in the workplace over a lot of years, and if I'm honest, we've fought for a lot, and I fear we're about to go backwards with some of the attitudes that we're now seeing. So I think the issue of stigma that you've raised is a very real one. It's all bound in with the culture of communities as well. And what happens is you tend to get approaches that come down through generations. And so behaviour becomes accepted. And if I can say, because I chair something called the Global Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking, and we see this in that area, particularly in something like child marriage, where just generation after generation has accepted child marriage. And so it becomes, well, not accepted, it's just been what happens, and people don't fight against it. So what you need to find is the advocates, preferably the young advocates, who are able to actually fight against these issues, who are able to say, no, that is not right. But in order for them to be able to do that, they need to understand and they need to be able to see the role models elsewhere. And I think that's why education, awareness raising, and people being role models is so important.
Well, coming from a low middle income country myself, I would like to add, first of all, yes, we are focusing on stigma at the workplace in this particular meeting without neglecting the whole issue of stigma. And I think there will be a conference, maybe you will mention that later, solely on the topic of stigma. But I would like to say that when my daughter and myself founded Dialab, the National Diabetes Organization in Lebanon, I had a lot of people telling me, why do you need to do this? Are you happy going on TV saying your daughter has type 1 diabetes? Is that something you are proud of? From the family, from the close friends, you don't need to do that. Just take care of your daughter. And my answer was, I need to do that. If what I say as a mother, my experience, can save another mother the hassle I've been through, the confusion I felt, or at least shorten the time where she feels confused, then there is a purpose for what I'm doing. And my daughter insisted this at the same time to say, if whatever I say can help another young person living with diabetes, then there is a purpose to this. And we went on despite all the comments. And something else, maybe you will not believe it, but up until today, in certain communities, when there is a girl living with type 1 diabetes, they hide it because she will not get married if this is a known fact. Just imagine what that what that is for that young lady, what kind of a burden, emotional, psychological, psychosocial, name it. And I know of one particular case very quickly from one of the Gulf countries. The young lady had a boyfriend, they don't call it boyfriend in Arabic. We don't have that, at least not in the Gulf countries. But she had a young man from a family of friends who was to be married to her. 7 years she was living with the hope of getting married, hiding from his family that she had type 1 diabetes. When they knew, they broke up. I know her personally. This is not a story. This is something I lived with her. And what happened is he got married. After a couple years of depression, she got married. And when I met her, that had happened 7 years ago. What they told him in order to break up with her, they said, she will never be able to have children. This young lady met with the same gentleman 7 years later. He was married with no children. She had 3 kids during that time. I'm not saying this is supposed to happen, but this is a message on its own. Don't stigmatize against, especially girls living with type 1 diabetes.
This is
Shouldn't
something
be
we
the
hear
case.
from every other young advocate from all over the world, even Europe, where people face relationship-related stigma, but that's not uncommon. I know there's a question up here. Okay, so so can you please introduce yourselves as well to the audience, because you're being live streamed and people may not know you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this wonderful talk. My question is for Baroness May. I saw that you were insisting on awareness and education and not much on legislation. So where do you strike the balance? Because we're here as parliamentarians thinking that we can help push the agenda through some legislation. So where is the balance between legislation, awareness, advocacy? Because this applies to many other problems we're facing. Does it come with age later or with experience? I don't mean to say that you're old, but does it come with experience that awareness and education is more effective, or there is a balance to strike between all of this? Thank you.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, you may very well have a background of legislation or come to legislation at a point. But the reason I said what I did about legislation is because I think if you try to have a specific piece of legislation in relation to diabetes and how diabetes is treated in the workplace, then the impact of that is going to be potentially more negative in the workplace than positive. Now, you can look at the Equality Act in the UK. There's an Equality Act which covers a number of characteristics. You could take that sort of approach so that there isn't a sense of diabetes being... I don't think diabetes should be stigmatized itself as the one thing that requires a bit of legislation. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. And even if you have the right legislation, if you haven't raised awareness, if you haven't educated people properly, then the legislation will not be put in place properly and will not be enacted properly at grassroots level. So you can't have one without the other. And as I say, you have to be very careful on legislation, that it doesn't just act as a negative rather than acting as a positive.
I think we have a lot of questions, so...
Good afternoon. Halima Kakour, MP, Member of Parliament from Lebanon, and member of the Commission of Education at the Parliament. I have 2 questions, one for you and one for Theresa May. Regarding the law, do you think that starting with the code of conduct or code of ethics at work is better than starting with the law? Secondly, regarding the education, do you think that starting the education it should be through extracurriculum activities or within the curriculum? First. Secondly, we have 2 types of schools, public and private. In Lebanon, 20% of students go to the public and 80% to the private. So how can we deal, do we have that, like best practices related to public and private? And third, we know that diabetes impact human rights in general. But I need to ask about women and children and poor, most vulnerable people. أكيد, for sure, diabetes impact more vulnerable women more than others, more than men in the workplace. But do you have studies about the impact on women? Thank you.
I got lost on the last impact on women. But let me answer the bit about education. When we talk about education, we don't mean school-level education. We mean it's education at general population level. I need to have the workforce educated. I need to have the managers in organizations educated, healthcare professionals, as I said, because unfortunately they know a bit of medicine. And not that it doesn't mean that they don't know a lot, but they know one little piece of the whole thing. And we have horror stories to tell about that. We need to educate politicians. We need to be aware of what diabetes is, what accommodations need to be made for people living with the disease. In schools, what we do is we fight for a school nurse, which is very hard to get in some places, but we do work on that. And we do courses, we do some specific training when there's a kid with diabetes in school. It doesn't really make any difference to go teach kids about diabetes or any other disease, for that matter, if they don't have a friend with diabetes. It's just teaching them about dinosaurs. It's not there. We do the awareness campaigns in schools when there are kids with diabetes. It's general health education, which has to do with just everything they do, but we need to raise awareness in the general population of what it really is. It's not just a bit of sugar. Stop eating sugar. Oh, you caused it. You ate too much sugar as a kid. And you're a bad parent because your kid eats ice cream every day. That's what we need to do without. That's what I mean by education in the broader sense.
Yes, I did mention schools. Thank you for your question. I didn't mean it as an extracurricular activity. It cannot be. It has to be embedded within the program. And I know our program in Lebanon is very dense, but we're not talking about a weekly or monthly. I mean, one session per semester for the students to understand, and I have to respectfully disagree with you. Yes, we need awareness in school, not talking diabetes to the kids, talking healthy nutrition, talking the importance of physical activity, talking how we build healthy habits since we are little kids, and then we carry them on in our adult lifehood. I want to mention also, you asked about public versus private schools. This is an issue on itself. I don't think only in Lebanon, but maybe we have it more acute because we have a lot of private schools. We tend to put our kids in private schools, and yet the majority are in the public sector. Okay, so from my experience, the requests we get are never from public schools. The requests we get are from private schools to which we respond. I have tried very hard, and I can count on one hand the public schools who allowed us, yes, we will talk about that, who allowed us to go because of bureaucracy, a lot of permits needed. I don't know what the issue is there, but my aim is to have a holistic approach to the topic and to visit every single school at least once a year So the children are exposed to know what is diabetes, whether they have or not a classmate living with diabetes. They might have it in the neighborhood, it might be a cousin or anywhere living there. And one more thing I would like to mention, again, something that was spoken about at several panels during the high-level meeting in New York, was that the parliamentarians were telling us, we don't know enough about this. I was really kind of a little bit lovingly aggressive to somebody when I was saying, but why did you allow the topic of diabetes to be diluted throughout the political declaration? We are counting on you. And he said, I didn't know enough. And I was like, I wasn't invited. We did what we needed to do. So there is a missing link that we need to work on between the parliamentarians. We cannot ask them to do something they don't understand. So yes, you mentioned it, Anna, and thank you for that, that awareness and education is also needed for parliamentarians. Not everyone is like you, Theresa May, that someone who's living with diabetes. You don't need anybody to explain it. You are a living example of it. And thank you for what you are doing. But the other people who are supposed to do a job, they cannot do it if they don't understand what's expected out of them and what the other person is in need of. And this is a call also. Every time there is a talk about people living with diabetes or any chronic disease, people living with the disease should be present. This is not an option. It's mandatory.
Nothing about us without us.
Exactly,
Yes, okay.
exactly.
So
they need to be at a decision making. They don't just need to be at the table. They need to be the main dish at the table. This is what I would say.
And if you're not invited, we'll pull our own chairs, right? I think part of the question was for Theresa May.
There was a question to me about codes of conduct, which I think can be useful for yes, companies voluntarily signing up to codes of conduct, I think, can be useful. I think companies who do this well, being willing to have their name proclaimed and being willing to show others what they're doing is also useful. And if I may, just a comparator, I sit on the Advisory Council of the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse in the UK, and this is one of the things they do. They have beacon companies who are willing to go out and talk to other companies about how they are ensuring that their workplace is a safe and encouraging workplace for employees they have who are victims of domestic abuse. So actually, companies that are dealing well with those employees who have diabetes, being seen to be beacons and being able to use their experience to encourage others, I think is also helpful.
Thank you. So there's a question behind you, and I can take just two more questions because we have to go to the mentee. Please.
Amazing. You've shared so many experiences and you've been so open about it. I'm Gordon Galia, just recently retired from WHO, now honorary professor in the University of Malta. We've heard a lot about the direct lived experience of stigma in schools and workplaces, communities, family, cultural, etc. 2 days ago, we've seen a new macro level of stigma. People may be denied visas if they have diabetes or chronic disease. This sits in the context of a decay or a reversal of thinking on multilateralism, something that I have dedicated a quarter century of working to, and I'm very worried, including the debates at the UN high-level meeting, which failed to achieve for the first time unanimity. We have two former premiers here, UK and Bermuda. Maybe I also have an invitation. Is there any comment about a new movement that is needed to respond to these new forces? Are there new, shall we go beyond advocacy into activism? Shall we look into not just legislation, but litigation, suing our governments, and so on? Are there new ways of making the point about equity and about social justice for people with diabetes, but also for all people with chronic disease?
There is a a lot I could say about one of the points you made about the decline of multilateralism. I think that is a real issue that we have to face, and but I think that in itself is a wider debate and discussion that we need to have. I was looking, just looking today actually, at the remarks that have been made in the United States about using diabetes as a potential reason for stopping somebody becoming a migrant into the United States, alongside various other health conditions. And obviously that is something that is of concern to all of us here, and will be of concern to people around the world. But you asked whether there are other things we should be doing, like litigation. As you know, the President of the United States is quite keen on litigation. But I'm not sure that somebody else litigating in various places is actually going to get us anywhere. And it often seems like an answer that will get to a solid result. But actually, you very often, even if you get the immediate result you want, you don't change minds. And the mindset point has been made. And what we need to be about is changing minds and changing attitudes and changing that mindset. And I don't think something like litigation actually gets you there.
So we have a comment from Honorable Craig Cannonier from Bermuda. So.
I just wanted to say that on this legislation part, one of the things that Bermuda has done, it's called SCARS, and it's saving children and revealing secrets. We were trying to attack the issue of kids being abused.
We can't hear you very well.
No, we were trying to attack the issue of kids actually being abused. And so all of our parliamentarians, we created a policy in our legislation that they all must do SCARS training. So that they are aware. And I think one of the directions that we can go in as legislators is to ensure that we do something that's done around the world in most professions, continuing education. And so I think we might be able to do that with diabetes and ensure that our legislators and the new ones coming in are all given a briefing and some training so that they do understand the issue that is at hand. And that's something that I think we can adopt. As far as the travel and the visa, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Again, because as our former Prime Minister has said, it's awareness. How do you create legislation around something like that when you don't even understand it? So that would be very, very, very difficult.
Thanks. So politics can be with a small p or a capital P. In this case, sadly, we have to. There's a question.
I have a small ask about this, creating this continuous education for legislators. Please make sure the lived experience voice is included in those updates.
That was made very clear from this panel.
I'm Sonia Sidhu, Member of Parliament from Canada. First of all, thank you, PDG, and giving us this platform, and thank you all the powerful ladies who are sitting there, and great discussion. I have one comment and question. My comment is this: in Canada, because I present a private member bill, now it's a national framework for diabetes, it's law. And what Madam Teresa, you said that like the awareness, management, and inventing database, and if we are not doing invention of the cure of diabetes, then we need funds. So this is all about my bill. I'm speaking tomorrow on my bill too. So all legislature, when they're presenting a bill, they should be looking after everything, not this just after 5 years. The bill has to see that what need to be done more, because the life is changing now. AI, digitalization, innovation is coming. If we need to change, and then we do need to change. And my question is this: because like I'm from Brampton, when I visit to hospital, there's a 22 dialysis machines were there. And there's people are coming and doing dialysis. When I'm asking the question, the main source is diabetes. Like that's why they have a kidney failure. So we were having discussion last night, and then there's onset delay diabetes, 5 to sometimes more than 5 years. What we need to do if there's that delay, and definitely untreated diabetes has serious consequences. What needs to be done? So I'm not knocking down family docs, not at all. So there should be guidelines. Like every country need to think about the guidelines. Like, you know, they have to check the diabetes. Person has a diabetes, or if they have a high level of the history, there should be guidelines so that they can check the diabetes. So there's no delay to figure out. Early detection is the key. So what needs to be done so we can figure out early set on diabetes? This is something, what needs to be done on that? This is a big question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Before anyone answers this, can I take 2 more questions here, because we're nearing the end of time, and you can answer them together with the ending remarks from you. But before we go, I would display a QR code here. Chris, just the last slide. This is the last slide where we're asking for the parliamentarians here and the stakeholders here, the global experts here, for your commitments. What can you do to change this? So you can scan this in and fill that in while we listen to these 2 for the questions and you guys respond to it. Is that okay? Because I just have 7 minutes left. You can say that in your ending remarks. There's a question there. Do we have the mic? That was engaging. You were telling me in the morning it's very long, but it was engaging. It was good.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Carmelo Abela. I'm a member of parliament from Malta. I came here to learn and to listen, but I have some comments to make, and thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, I think we need to emphasize the role of the media, and we need to be have our voice heard. We need to be friendly with the media and to portray the issue when it raises with the media, and I think it's a powerful tool as well. Role models can help, and when Theresa May was talking about a little bit about her experience, and you also mentioned, I think, mental health at some point in time. We had a colleague in Parliament that openly spoke about mental health some years ago. Today, when we tackle the issue of mental health, I know it's not related, but it can be related up to a certain extent. Nowadays, everyone is talking and pushing for more mental health attention, so on and so forth. So I think let us not diminish the role of having role models. We have to admit that we need a culture change, and culture change does not happen overnight. So all the things that were mentioned, I think, are part of a bigger picture, which is culture change, which we need to continue working on that every day. I believe that we need to continue talking about the rights of every person, irrespective of whether that person has diabetes or not, whether that person has a physically inability, whatever. So I think that is where I agree with what Theresa said about legislation. We should have an equality legislation, not a legislation specifically on persons that have diabetes. One final comment about international organizations. Being a former foreign minister, I also can say a lot about multilateralism. Professor Galia mentioned that. But I think we need to work with international organizations as well, through our politicians, through our political leaders that maybe have more frequent encounters with these international global organizations that at times appear to be so big, but I think somehow we can still influence them, especially when we listen and are knowledgeable about certain stories that happened to people, where they wanted to access to a place of work and because of certain things they couldn't. So I think still we can try to influence these organizations, not by litigation maybe, because they are too big to go and fight with them, sort of. But I think through convincing them and maybe through our politicians and political leaders that have maybe more opportunities for them to speak with these organizations. Thank you and all the best for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There's one question here, and then we end with this. Can you please, can I just ask all of you to please scan this code? It will ask you a question about what are your commitments, what concrete actions you will take, whether they're big or small, in your capacity to help reduce stigma in your environment. And we have the question.
Okay, thank you for giving me the forum, the space. I'm Massimo Benedetti, I'm from Italy. I'm not a parliamentarian. I don't have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and I am a diabetologist. Nobody's perfect. So I've been around quite since a long time, and I'm really astonished on how much is still to be done to guarantee, a good life for people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. However, if I go back to the old good days, I do remember how much poorer was the condition of people with diabetes. That means that some of the things that has been done have been working, some other they did not. So it could be wise to consider what has been working and then to reinforce the action that has been effective, and to avoid to waste time and energy in what we know didn't work. So this could be something, and there is not a single recipe which fits for all the latitude. So we need to be creative and tailor what is to be done according to the different areas, not to discriminate anybody, but because there are different needs in different areas of the work and in the world and in the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Benedetti. So I'll ask you to respond to what the last three questions and comments were, and also give your closing remarks so that we can end this panel with that.
Well, I think, first of all, I think some very good points made by Carmelo. Having, as you said, you came to learn, and hopefully this is what, partly what this is about, actually, is about ensuring that through the debate and discussion, more people can understand what they can do, scan the code, for dealing with this issue. And the last point that was made about the importance of not just trying to create new ideas all the time, but actually look at what has worked previously and build on that, I think is very, very salutary to tell us that. As politicians, we all too often think that we're going to come up with a new idea, and then we discover either that somebody tried it 20 years ago and it didn't work, or somebody tried it 20 years ago but it did work, but because they were different, we want to make it ours instead. So, but actually learning what's worked is really important. Can I pick up the point about, but the point that was made from our colleague from Canada in relation to the medical side of things? I think it's hugely important. There's quite a lot of research work being done around the world, including research being funded by Breakthrough T1D on this whole question of early identification of likelihood to develop diabetes. And from that, and there's a campaign, particularly in the UK at the moment, from the parents of a young child who died because their diabetes hadn't been identified, about education of healthcare professionals, as we were talking about, that at an early stage, the healthcare professional will know what to look for, and even potentially, I mean, the father is talking about early blood tests, etc. So trying to find a way of picking up at a very early stage what's going to happen, because as we know all too often, for children, it's only diagnosed when they've gone into a particular crisis point with their diabetes. But I also wanted to pick up what I think is a very good argument, and legislators should look at this in relation to governments dealing with diabetes. And I'm sure this is the case. You reference costs, particularly of dialysis, in Canada. In the UK, roughly 10% of our NHS budget is spent on diabetes. 80% of that is spent on dealing with complications from diabetes, which with better understanding, better awareness, better management, we would not see so many amputations, for example, as a result of diabetes. So there is a very real, I think, cost implication for governments and a cost benefit for governments if they actually, and for health health systems if they deal with this early, properly, raise awareness, help people manage their diabetes, and then we could ensure that people are suffering less from those complications, and actually that they will benefit, people with diabetes will benefit, and the taxpayer will benefit too. So let's think about that argument with governments.
Thank you, Baroness May. So.
Okay, I have some points, I mean, not addressing everything, but some things I had the chance to write. So first of all, I would really encourage you not to feel discouraged by any declaration of President Trump. And I will stop at that. And related to screening people to know if they are prone to getting diabetes, yes, there are new tests, and that was part of the discussion we had at the Congress in the United States, but many barriers, one of them the cost and the insurance companies refusing to include that into the covered tests and so many others. But actually, if a family with one member with type 1 diabetes is accepted to screen the whole family, because I've seen cases of 4 members from one family with type 1 diabetes, which was, to me, was shocking first time I came across those cases. But anyways, I personally think it would be very cost effective, if we want to consider it a cost, to do those screenings, especially in the families with cases, so we can be preventive rather than giving medication and the cost of all the complications. Now, somebody mentioned the mindset. I would like to say again, it takes a whole generation, maybe 20 years, to change a fixed idea in the mindset of people. So we don't have time to our advantage, but this should not discourage us. All the contrary, we should start yesterday rather than tomorrow. And my final statement now. First of all, I would like to personally thank the government of Malta and all the parliamentarians present here from anywhere. Thank you for having me in the name of Peter. I offer these thanks for having the voice of the International Diabetes Federation. And before I do my final sentence, I would like to tackle something you mentioned about international organizations. Well, here we are, the International Diabetes Federation, dedoc, parliamentarians, and we have the PDGN, which is a great platform gathering us international organizations with you, the parliamentarians. So this is what we call upon. This is the holistic approach that we need. And we wish you continue with those meetings because they are very much needed. So to finalize, I would say, as the slogan of this year's campaign, let's know more before we get to do more. So we need to know more in order to do more for the people with diabetes in general and especially at the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
I subscribe to just about everything that has been said, and we can continue our conversations afterwards over coffee, dinner. There's 2 more days to go. And I would like to go back to the stigma thing in the workplace and inclusion, because inclusion is not, and I'm going to wrap up on this, inclusion is not a favor, it's a right. And the day someone with diabetes walks into the workplace, checks their blood glucose, and nobody notices, that's the day we have turned the tide on stigma.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Anna.
very
Thank you for this powerful statement. I would like to close with reminding everyone that there is a summit happening in Jaipur in India early next year, I think in February or March, in February, which is the Stigma Summit, where we are hoping that we are going to focus more on stigma and try to understand how it affects people and what can be done, both at a policy level, at a societal level, to handle this. But thank you so much for this very engaging discussion. This has been very insightful, and specifically, Theresa May, to tell you, because I think many of us advocates probably do not understand the kind of perspective that you were coming from, and it was very insightful for me personally as well, and I'm sure for all the advocates who are watching this online, thanks to the dedoc platform, was live streaming this whole thing where all over the globe, young advocates, young people with diabetes, and diabetes experts, healthcare professionals are watching this live stream to listen to all of us. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all of you for your inputs. I was told that the QR code was not working, but it has started working perhaps. No, it's still not working? It's still not working. Okay, so what I will do is that I'll send it to, it's working, okay. I'll send it to all of you on email, so you can take your time, think about what you can do. It will be very insightful for us as PDGN to be able to think about what can global stakeholders, including parliamentarians, do to bring about this change. Thank you so much. There is one small request that we had made with Theresa May. I want us to have a picture together first, the panel, and then for everyone, then with PDGN, please. And after that, I want everyone with diabetes, because I have been getting emails and WhatsApps and calls like, we want to have a picture with Theresa May, so please then come up and have your picture, have your moment here. I have another request. We sent you a declaration because we know that you will not be here on Sunday. There's the board. I would like you and Sir Philip May to please sign it before you go, so that we can then, the other global stakeholders, it will be your first sign. The first sign on the board will be yours and Sir Philip May's, and then we can get the others rallied behind these calls to action. Are you okay with that? Thank you so much. We should take the first picture of the panel. Yeah. Let's just do the first with the panel, and then we can just. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay.